Greetings, fellow hostages. The riots in Baltimore and in probably Tel Aviv, Israel, have caused me to return to a very, very old premise of mine. I think as we consider integration in the old school sense in the 50s and 60s, and particularly now, we would be doing a disservice if we did not gently, or perhaps not so gently, remind some of our white colleagues that the collection of exotic pets, i.e. having black people around simply for the color of their skin and not necessarily the content of their character, is not any better than open discrimination. The problem with the exotic pet theory is the minute you have a disagreement with that black person, he becomes the polar opposite of all the praise you heaped upon him. Because ultimately, it wasn't because of his intellect, his character, or his abilities, but simply his pigment that you were wearing sort of like an adornment, like a fur coat, like a ring, like a prized watch, or a favorite piece of clothing. Baltimore shows us that even if the government has the same race as the aggrieved, it does not necessarily have to have the same respect toward the aggrieved. The Tel Aviv example says that even if government has the same religion as the aggrieved, it may not have any respect toward the aggrieved. We, as black people in the West, find ourselves in a very intimate land that we did not create. The institutions were not designed by us, but now we find ourselves, in some cases, operating them, Baltimore and other black-led urban centers, and in the case of Israel, actually being airlifted by white Israelis. I'm referencing the Ethiopian Jews, airlifted to Israel, and I'm sure in the last century when this airlift occurred, that the thought of race riots was not even a remote afterthought. All white people aren't racist, but there is racism in white institutions. You don't have to be a flaming liberal to know that there is a distinct institutional issue with regard to police and black men. And if we control all factors on the black male side of the equation, if you're not a felon, if you're not trying to exacerbate a confrontation, if you're not trying to turn a field interview with a police officer into a civil rights cause, then we have a case in Israel where an Ethiopian Jew in his Israeli army uniform was beaten by two Israeli policemen. And of course, this was recorded by the camera on somebody's telephone, which has become, by default, the leading civil rights documentation method for our new era. Integration for integration's sake is as disgusting as discrimination for discrimination's sake. I would much rather that people unite around shared values than some perverted desire to have exotic pets. It's not working in America, and clearly it's not working overseas. If we cannot have mutual respect, then sadly we may be on the road to mutually assured destruction. This is Captain Black, the Hood Conservative.